The ship landed with a low hum, its engines fading into silence as dust settled around it. Inside, the crew began unloading supplies, moving with quiet discipline. Everyone had a job, everyone followed orders, except her. She stood at the back of the cargo bay, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. The alien girl, barely 5 feet tall, with green-tinted skin and silver hair that shimmered under the lights, watched the others but didn't move. Her name was Lyra, and she had made one thing very clear since boarding the human vessel. She didn't take orders from anyone, not even from the man who saved her. Captain Mason approached slowly, not angry, not loud. His voice was calm as ever. "Lyra, I asked you to help with the medical crates." She didn't even blink. "I'm not your slave, human," she said sharply. Mason paused, just for a second. He was used to harsh words. He had fought wars, seen planets burn. But this was different. This wasn't hate. It was pain hidden behind defiance. "I didn't say you were," he replied. "But everyone helps here." "I didn't ask to be here," she snapped back. "Your people took me in, locked a bracelet on my wrist. And now I'm expected to smile and say thank you." She raised her hand, showing the thin black band around her wrist. A tracking and safety monitor, not a prison, but to her, it might as well be chains. Mason's jaw tightened. But he didn't react. "You're not in chains, Lyra. You're on a ship with food, safety, and people who care if you live or die." "I didn't ask you to care," she growled. "I survived before without your rules. I'll survive again." The other crew members had stopped working, watching from a distance. No one dared step in. Lyra was known for her temper, and Mason, for some reason, never punished her. But this time, the air felt different. "You think surviving alone makes you strong?" Mason asked softly. "It just makes you tired." Lyra's eyes flashed. "Don't pretend to understand me," she said. "You have no idea what I've been through." Mason didn't reply. He turned and walked away, not out of anger, but something worse, disappointment. And that hurt her more than any shouting ever could. Later, at dinner, Lyra sat alone. She always did. The crew talked quietly, laughing at stories, sharing food. Mason didn't force her to join, but he always made sure she had a plate. She picked at it. Without eating, her stomach growled, but pride was louder. Why did this human get under her skin? Why didn't he yell, hit, do what others had done before? Instead, he just looked at her with tired eyes, like he'd seen her soul, and didn't flinch. That night, as the ship floated in orbit, Lyra stood outside the viewing deck, looking at the stars. She thought of her planet, now rubble, her family gone, her people scattered like dust in space. She heard footsteps. She didn't need to turn, she knew it was him. "You don't have to like me," Mason said, standing beside her. "But if you stay on this ship, you follow my orders. Not because I'm your master, but because we keep each other alive out here." Lyra's voice was low. "You can't force me." "I know," he said, "but actions have consequences. If you're not willing to be part of this crew, I'll find a place for you elsewhere. Somewhere you can live without rules, without help." That shook her. He wasn't threatening her. He was giving her freedom, and that was terrifying, because for the first time in a long time, someone was letting her choose. The stars reflected in her eyes as she whispered, "I don't trust you." Mason nodded. "Then earn my trust by your actions, and I'll do the same." He walked away, leaving her alone with the silence of space. Lyra clenched her fists. Her mind screamed to run, to fight. But something inside her had shifted. Not much, just a crack. Tomorrow she wouldn't follow orders, but maybe she wouldn't fight them either. And for Captain Mason, that was enough to begin. Asterisk. The next morning, the crew prepared for a supply run on the nearby moon base. The mission was simple: get in, load up crates, and return before the solar storm rolled through. Everyone knew their roles. Everyone. Except Lyra. She stood near the shuttle ramp, arms behind her back, watching as Mason gave instructions to the team. He didn't glance at her, didn't point her out, but his words carried weight. This base is unstable, he said. You follow orders, you stick to your partners, no wandering. Lyra smirked. Loud enough for others to hear. So many rules. Does your crew get a sticker if they behave? The others didn't laugh. A few glanced at her, then quickly looked away. They knew better. Mason paused, turned to face her slowly. His voice remained calm. You'll be with me, Lyra. Stay close and don't touch anything without asking. She gave him a mocking salute. Yes, Captain, she said with a fake sweet voice. I promise to be a very good girl. Mason said nothing more. He just stepped into the shuttle. The moon base was dark, half-powered, with flickering lights and creaking metal. The atmosphere was thin but breathable. Mason and Lyra moved through the corridors, passing empty halls filled with stacked crates and old equipment. Lyra kept looking around. Her eyes were sharp, curious, defiant. She trailed behind Mason on purpose, ignoring his hand signals to stop or stay close. Finally, he stopped walking and turned to her. You're not listening, he said quietly. And this place is not safe. Lyra leaned against a wall and yawned. I've survived worse holes than this. Maybe I should give you some lessons. Mason stepped forward, his face now inches from hers. His voice dropped to a cold whisper. This is your last warning, Lyra. One wrong move here could kill us both. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes, fear. But she covered it quickly with a grin. Noted, she said, then turned and walked down the hallway before he could stop her. Mason clenched his jaw and followed. She was fast, slipping between crates and rooms like a shadow. He finally caught up to her in a large storage room, but it was too late. She had already opened a sealed crate. Inside was a stack of alien tech high-voltage power cells not meant to be disturbed. Don't touch, Mason started. Too late, her hand brushed one of the cores. It lit up with a sharp hum, then began vibrating. Lights flashed red on the side of the crate. Get back! Mason shouted, grabbing her arm and pulling her away as fast as he could. They dove behind a crate just as the first cell exploded. The blast was small, but enough to trigger the fire alarms and emergency lockdown. Thick metal doors slammed down. All over the base, ceiling exits, smoke filled the room. Red warning lights blinked through the haze. Lyra coughed and looked around in shock. What just happened? She whispered. Mason stood slowly, checking for injuries. His voice was no longer calm, no longer soft. It was sharp and full of fire. You just turned a simple mission into a trap. Because you couldn't take a warning seriously, Lyra backed away. I didn't think. No, you didn't, he snapped. You never do, and now this whole section is sealed off, and our exit is locked because of you. She looked at the crate again, realizing just how close they had come to death. Mason walked past her, tapped his comm. Team Alpha. Report. No reply. Team Beta. Do you copy? Static. The blast must have knocked out their connection to the others. They were cut off. Lyra looked at him, her voice small. Can we fix it? We'll have to, Mason said, pulling out a portable scanner. But from now on, you don't move unless I say. You don't speak unless it's important. You don't even breathe unless I approve it. She opened her mouth to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. It wasn't anger. It was cold focus, the kind soldiers wear when survival hangs by a thread. She nodded slowly, her voice almost a whisper. Okay. Together, they began moving again. Careful, quiet. Mason led the way, while Lyra followed without a word. And for the first time since joining the ship, she listened, not because she wanted to obey, but because she realized discipline wasn't cruelty, it was survival. The damage was worse than Mason thought. After the blast, smoke had seeped into the air vents. The base's backup systems kicked in, but one wrong move had already shifted the whole mission. 2 crew members from Team Beta were injured. Another was missing. Mason stared at the blinking map on his wrist pad. Sections of the base were now locked down. Energy was unstable, and oxygen was dropping fast in the lower levels. The price of disobedience had come, and everyone knew where it started. Lyra stood beside a crate, eyes fixed on the floor. She wasn't talking anymore. No smirks, no mocking, no sarcastic comments, just silence. The kind that weighs heavy. One of the crew members, a tall woman named Hask, stormed toward her, rage burning in her voice. Because of you, Gray's arm is shattered. Because of you, Juno is still trapped in Sector 4. Lyra didn't move, didn't flinch. She didn't know, Mason said calmly, stepping between them. No, Hask snapped. She didn't listen, that's worse. Mason didn't disagree. He turned to Lyra, looked her straight in the eyes. This isn't a game, he said quietly. And now people are paying the price for your mistake. Lyra's throat tightened. She opened her mouth to speak but stopped. What could she say? Sorry? Would that bring back the missing crewman? Would that fix a broken arm? No, Mason turned away, speaking into his cum. Hask, take the wounded back to the shuttle, secure them, and wait for my signal. What about her? Hask asked, nodding toward Lyra. She's coming with me, Mason said. And she's going to learn what real discipline looks like. They moved through the metal halls, the dim emergency lights flickering with every step. Mason led the way. Lyra followed. Without a word, her chest felt heavy. She had seen pain before, seen fire and war. But this guilt was different. They reached Sector 4. The door was sealed shut. Sparks flying from the busted panel. Juno's inside, Mason muttered, pulling open a toolkit. Help me, he said without looking back. Lyra stepped forward slowly, knelt beside him. Her hands trembled, but she worked. Wires sparked. Panels clicked. They moved fast, breath steady. Mason guiding every move, and for once, Lyra followed without resistance. Minutes passed. Then, the door slid open with a screech inside. Juno lay pinned under a fallen beam, barely conscious. Lyra rushed forward without thinking. She grabbed the beam with both hands and pushed. It didn't budge. Mason joined her. Together they strained, grunted, shoved, and it moved. They pulled Juno free. Mason checked her pulse. She's breathing, he said, then looked at Lyra. Not bad, Lyra nodded. Sweat running down her face, but there was something else there. Something new. When they got back to the shuttle, the crew didn't cheer. They were quiet, tired and hurt, but they were alive. Mason helped secure Juno in a med pod, then turned to Lyra. Come with me, he said. He led her to a private room, one used for ship training. She followed without asking why. Inside, he handed her a short rod made of training alloy. Strike me, he said. She blinked. What? Strike me, he repeated. You have all this fire, this anger. Use it. Show me what you've got. Lyra hesitated, then stepped forward and swung. He blocked it easily. Again, he said. She swung harder. He dodged, caught her wrist, flipped her gently to the mat. She gasped. Lesson 1, he said. Strength without control is weakness. She got up, tried again. He countered every blow, guiding her movements, correcting her stance. It wasn't punishment. It was focus. Structure, discipline. By the end, she lay on the mat, breathing hard, body aching. But her eyes were clear. He stood above her and said, You cost this crew pain, but you also helped bring one of them back. Redemption starts with action, not words. Lyra didn't argue. For the first time she nodded, not out of fear, but respect. Then let me earn it, she whispered. Mason extended his hand, and this time, she took it without hesitation. Asterisk. That night Lyra was gone. Her bunk was empty. Her wrist monitor deactivated. Not even the security cams had caught her leaving. The ship was quiet, floating in orbit over the frozen moon. The crew rested, exhausted from the chaos earlier. But Mason couldn't sleep. He stood alone in the hallway, staring at the door she should have been behind. He knew she wouldn't run far. Not because she didn't want to, but because deep down she didn't know where else to go. He sighed and grabbed his coat. No alarms were triggered. That meant she'd slipped out quietly. She didn't run because of fear. She ran because of shame. Mason checked the shuttle logs. One of the old side transports was missing, small, unarmed. just enough to reach the abandoned mining post a few clicks west. He followed outside. The wind bit hard, slicing across his face like glass. The sky above was dark, with only the soft glow of the gas giant reflecting light onto the icy cliffs. Mason walked through the frost, his boots crunching against frozen ground. The signal from the missing shuttle led him to an old station. Its roof half collapsed, antennas broken and rusted. Inside, he found her. Lyra sat on the floor near a dead heater, arms wrapped around her knees, silver hair falling across her face. She didn't look up when he entered. He didn't speak right away. He sat down across from her and waited. Minutes passed, filled only with the hum of silence. Finally, her voice broke the air, low and bitter. "Why'd you come here?" "You're part of my crew," he said simply. She shook her head, laughing bitterly. "No, I'm not. I was a burden from the beginning. I've done nothing but bring pain." Mason leaned forward, his voice quiet but firm. "You saved Juno. You worked beside me to fix what you broke." "I broke everything," she snapped, eyes suddenly burning. "Back home. On my planet. I betrayed my own family just to survive. I stole food from dying children. I sold information to the enemy to keep a roof over my head. And now I'm doing the same here, messing everything up." Mason didn't flinch. He waited until her words slowed, her breathing steadied. Then he said the words that silenced her completely. "So did I." Her head snapped up, eyes wide. "I've made choices I'll never forgive myself for," he said, staring into the dark. "I ordered a strike that wiped out a village because intel said it was a rebel hideout. Turned out it was just farmers. The guilt still follows me, every night." Lyra was speechless. She thought humans were clean, noble, untouched. But here he was flawed, scarred, and still standing. "You know what saved me?" he asked. "Not a medal, not some speech. It was someone giving me a second chance. Not because I deserved it, but because I was willing to change." She looked down at her shaking hands. "I don't know how to change. You already started." Mason said, "The moment you chose to help instead of run. The moment you listened instead of mocked." She hugged her knees tighter. Her voice trembled. "I'm scared, Captain." He nodded. "So am I." The wind howled outside, rattling the old metal walls. Lyra finally met his eyes again, her voice a whisper. "Why do you care?" "Because I see someone worth saving," he said. "And because I don't believe in giving up on people just because they've fallen." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away. She hated crying. It made her feel weak, but right now she didn't care. He stood and held out his hand. "Let's go home," he said. She stared at it, unsure, but this time she reached out and took it. He pulled her to her feet. No speeches, no lectures, just quiet understanding between two broken souls. As they walked back to the ship, side by side, Lyra looked up at the stars and whispered, "Thank you." And Mason, without turning, replied, "You're welcome, not as a commander, but as someone who had once been lost too." The ship hummed softly as it floated through deep space. Repairs were underway. Crew members worked in shifts, and the silence between Lyra and the others was no longer filled with hate, it was filled with distance. After returning from the mining post, she hadn't said much. She didn't rebel, didn't argue. She just followed quietly. Like a shadow with weight in her steps, Mason noticed. He watched her movements, her silence. The way she stared at her hands when no one was looking. So he made a decision. On the third day, he called her to the observation deck. Lyra stood near the windows, arms crossed, unsure why she had been summoned. "I've reassigned you," Mason said simply. She blinked. "What?" "You'll be helping maintenance for the next cycle," he said. "They need hands on the lower decks. You'll report to Chief Tanner." Her face tightened. I thought I was part of your crew." "You are," he said, "but being part of a crew means learning how to carry your weight without being carried yourself." Lyra looked down, trying to hide the sting in her chest. "So you're sending me away?" "No," he said, "I'm letting you stand." And just like that, he walked out the next morning. She showed up at the maintenance bay. The place was noisy, filled with steam, clanking tools, and heavy metal. Smells. Chief Tanner, a broad-shouldered woman with grease-streaked arms, looked her up and down. Unimpressed. "You the troublemaker?" she asked bluntly. Lyra stayed quiet. Tanner tossed her a toolkit. "Let's see if you can fix more than attitudes." The work was brutal. Hot pipes, tight spaces, sharp bolts that cut into fingers. No one gave her special treatment. No one praised her. No one yelled either. They just worked, day by day. Lyra learned how to repair coolant lines, rewire conduits, seal pressure leaks. Her hands got dirty, her back ached, her mind burned with frustration. But she didn't quit. Sometimes she made mistakes, dropped tools, connected the wrong cables. Tanner didn't scream, she just sighed, took the tool from her hand and said, "Try again." Lyra did, over and over. One evening, she sat alone in the engine bay, a wrench in her lap. Her fingers were blistered, her arms bruised, but her heart, it was steady. Footsteps approached Mason, holding 2 steaming cups. He handed one to her, sat beside her without a word. "You knew this would break me," she muttered after a while. "No," he said. "I knew it might save you." She looked at her hands, then at the engine she had just repaired. "I didn't think I could do anything right," she said. "I always felt useless." "You weren't useless," he replied. "You were just never challenged the right way." Lyra leaned back against the cold wall. "I wanted you to be angry with me," she whispered. "Yell, hit something, throw me off the ship. I've seen what yelling does." Mason said, his voice soft. "It doesn't teach, it just leaves scars." She didn't respond, but her eyes were wet. He looked around the engine bay. "Hard work changes people," he said. "It did for me, it's doing it for you." Lyra nodded slowly. "I still make mistakes." "Good," he said. "That means you're learning." They sat in silence again, sipping from their cups. The ship thrummed around them like a heartbeat, steady and strong. "Why didn't you give up on me?" she asked finally, voice almost too soft to hear. Mason stared straight ahead. "Because I saw someone who never really had a choice, just survival," he said. "Now you finally do have a choice." She turned to face him, eyes filled with something she hadn't let herself feel in years, hope. "I want to stay," she said. "Then stay," he replied, without hesitation. She smiled, small but real, not the mocking grin she used before, but a quiet smile that meant something. And from that moment, Mason knew Lyra hadn't just been taught discipline, she had earned it. 2 weeks passed, and everything had changed. Not all at once, not with a speech, but slowly, quietly, like a wound learning how to heal. Lyra was no longer the angry shadow lurking in corners. She woke up early, reported on time, kept her eyes open and her voice steady. She had stopped yelling, stopped pushing, stopped hiding, but something inside her was still burning, a question that never left her. Would the crew ever forgive her? Or was she just fixing things that could never be made right? She got her answer one morning. An alarm blared in Corridor 6. A pipe had burst in the central coolant shaft, steam shooting everywhere, and a young crewman, Ely, was trapped on the wrong side. Mason and 2 engineers ran toward the chaos. But by the time they got there, Lyra was already inside. She had pulled the emergency override, crawled through a vent, and was working her way through the steam, goggles fogging up, heart pounding. "Lyra, fall back," Mason shouted from behind. "The sealed door. You're not trained for this pressure zone." She didn't answer because Eli was screaming, and her hands were already tightening a release valve. Her arm shook, burns forming on her skin, but she held on. With a final twist, the pressure dropped. The door hissed open. Mason rushed in and grabbed both of them, dragging them out to safety. Medical teams ran forward, treating Eli first, then turning to Lyra. She brushed them off, still gasping for breath, her voice raspy. "Is he okay?" "He's alive because of you," Mason said, kneeling beside her. Lyra looked away, not able to meet his eyes. "I didn't wait for orders," she muttered. "I just moved." And this time, he said, placing a hand on her shoulder, that saved someone. The crew watched silently from around the med bay, and something unspoken shifted. Later that night, Mason sat alone at the control table, writing a report. The door opened, and Lyra walked in slowly. Her arms were wrapped in cooling gel, her eyes tired but clear. "I need to say something," she said, standing firm. He looked up, surprised by the tone in her voice. This wasn't the girl who once mocked him. This wasn't the girl who once refused orders. This was someone new. "I was a danger to this ship," she said. "I was angry, broken, selfish. I didn't care if I lived or died. And I sure didn't care if anyone else got hurt." Mason didn't speak. He let her keep going. "But you didn't give up," she continued, voice shaking with emotion. "Even when I pushed you away. Even when I messed up again and again." Her fists clenched. "I don't deserve this place," she said, "but I want to. I want to earn it. I want to protect this crew like they protect me." Mason stood up slowly, walked around the table. "Then start now," he said. "I have," she whispered, "but I needed to say it. I needed to look you in the eye and apologize, not with tears, not with weakness, but with fire." He studied her face. She wasn't begging for pity. She was declaring war on the old version of herself, and Mason, he respected that. "You've come a long way, Lyra," he said. "But the journey isn't over," she nodded. "I know." He extended his hand again, not as a captain, but as someone who now saw her as an equal. She took it, firmly, and something passed between them, trust, respect, purpose. From the hallway, a few crew members peeked in, not out of suspicion this time, but with quiet approval. Lyra saw them and stood tall. She didn't hide anymore. She walked out of that room with her head held high. That night, no one looked at her like a mistake. They looked at her like one of them, and for the first time since she stepped on the ship, she believed. She belonged. A week later, the ship was calm. No fires, no damage, no injuries, just peace. Lyra stood at the training deck, gripping a practice staff. She moved through the drills Mason had taught her, blocking, striking, stepping in rhythm. Each motion felt cleaner, sharper, more focused than ever before. Behind her, the door opened with a soft hiss. Mason stepped in, arms crossed, watching without a word. She didn't stop, not until the final step, when she slammed the staff down with a sharp breath. Then she turned, not surprised to see him there. "I heard you were watching," she said with a smirk. "I was making sure you didn't fall on your face," Mason replied with a grin. Lyra tossed the staff to the rack, wiping sweat from her forehead. "I don't fall anymore," she said. "I noticed," he said, walking closer. "You've changed, Lyra." She tilted her head, a spark in her eyes. "Maybe. Or maybe this was always who I was meant to be. I just didn't have space to grow before." Mason nodded slowly. "You made space for yourself. You earned it." The intercom crackled. "Captain Mason to the bridge. Incoming message from command." He sighed and turned toward the door, but paused and glanced back at her. "Come with me," she blinked. "To the bridge? You're part of this ship, aren't you?" he said. Time the others saw that too. Lyra hesitated for just a moment, then followed him. Each step down the hall echoed differently than before. Not with shame or fear, but with purpose. The bridge was quiet, stars shining through the massive view screen. Crew members glanced up as Mason and Lyra entered together. Some offered nods, one even smiled. Lyra nodded back, heart steady. Command's voice came through the speakers. "Captain Mason, you're being reassigned to the diplomatic escort mission in Sector 9. You'll take a delegate on board and ensure their safety through contested space." Mason frowned slightly. "Sounds like trouble." "Exactly why we're sending you," the voice said. "Briefing files incoming." The line went dead, and a digital folder appeared on the screen. Lyra crossed her arms. "Diplomats, huh? Sounds boring. Not when they're being hunted by mercenaries." Mason replied. Pulling up the map, he pointed at several danger zones. "This route is suicide if you're not ready. She leaned in beside him, studying the red zones. Her voice was low, but certain. Then we'll be ready. Mason looked at her for a long moment. You said we, he said. Lyra nodded. I'm not running anymore. He reached out his hand, not in greeting, not in command, but as an offer. Lyra stared at it, then took it, proudly. In that simple gesture, everything changed. She wasn't just a passenger, not a burden, not a problem to be fixed. She was a crewmate, a fighter, a survivor, a woman who had been broken, but stood again, taller than before. Later that night, she stood by the viewing deck alone, watching the stars drift by. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass, not cold, not cruel, not angry, but strong. Mason walked in quietly. You ready for what's coming? He asked. Lyra smiled softly. If it's trouble, then it'll feel just like home, he chuckled. Maybe I did teach you something. She looked at him with gratitude in her eyes. No, she said. You gave me space to learn it myself. He didn't argue. He didn't need to. The stars outside blinked softly. And for the first time in her life, Lyra felt truly free. Not because someone saved her, but because someone believed she could save herself.